What's the most important question? What's the most common question in business? And it's one word, why? As your management team though, we think that there's an equally as important question, and that's why not? And in evaluating our three options right now, we think that that's going to be key, is asking why not in terms of the options. Now, going forward, just to provide context for our presentation, I'm going to quote the great investor Warren Buffett. And he asks, what's the difference between a good business person and a fantastic business person? A good business person is going to say yes to a lot of things, but a fantastic business person is going to say no to even more. Hi, my name's Ryan, and to the right of me is Cassie and Lisette. What's your current situation? Okay, your provider right now is Komatsu, and you have 2 stores in Fort McMurray for rental and for selling their equipment. Those 2 stores, they're not performing as well as we'd like them to do. Over the last 5 years, you've had a 2% growth in your revenue, whereas historically, we've had a 7% average. Now as well, the profit margin is not as great as we'd like it to be. Historically, we've been looking at about 24% profit margin. They're far below that. But as well, what's going on in Fort McMurray? Oil prices are at an all-time low, and they're not expected to go on the rise. Demand for construction equipment. Everything you sell is on the decline. And it's not by a small decline, 20, 30%. And that's for both leasing as well as selling it. And then there's uncertainty for the market recovery for oil. Again, your current financial analysis for your 2 stores. Your growth rate at 2%, profit margin 9.2%. Far below what we're currently at with our stores, our core stores in Quebec and Ontario. So executive summary though. How do we continue to grow as a business and increase our market share? Our recommendation is that we're going to sell our 2 stores in Fort McMurray, and we're going to focus on our stores in Quebec as well as Ontario. What's that going to do? Financial health. We're going to grow our market share, and we're going to get back to our historical averages for our profit margin and our growth. So just a quick agenda. Of course, I'm hoping I'll hand it off to Cassie later on, and then Lisette's going to close us off. Okay, so internal analysis. This is what we like to call the what do you got slide. This is where I can inflate and deflate our ego all at the same time. So strengths. We have that strong presence in Quebec and Ontario right now. And nobody's been able to really compete at the level that we're at. As well, our revenues are increasing in those stores, and far superior to what's been seen in Fort McMurray. Weaknesses though, is there are increasing costs. And that's just what's happening within the whole industry as a whole right now. But external analysis, Fort McMurray. We have 2 stores right now, 38 stores total. We don't have a whole lot of market share within Fort McMurray. And there's a problem there though, because market is not expected to grow within the upcoming 5-6 years. Less competition in the building industry though. And what this means is Komatsu right now, our service provider of our rental equipment, is they've got innovative new products that are coming out right now, and we're really trying to target alongside them a new market within the building industry. But weaknesses though, low oil price, and this is for Fort McMurray. How are we going to expand into Fort McMurray when nobody wants to buy anything? And it's a cyclical industry, so we're going to have ups and downs. And then rental equipment industry is dominated, and that's where we're really focusing on right now currently. But there's already so much competition within Fort McMurray. So for us to get more market share, it's going to be increasingly harder than it would be in, say, Quebec or Ontario. Okay, so how do we continue to grow our market capitalization while aligning to our core operations? Okay, so our alternatives are, we could buy retail chains right now in Fort McMurray. We could create our own stores, build them from scratch, or we can sell our stores, move out of Fort McMurray, and focus on what we're really good at. So, buying retail chains. We don't want you to do this. Why? Quite frankly, it's just not the right time, especially with the oil market. If oil's not there in Fort McMurray, yes, prices will be lower for what we can purchase by, but there's still such a premium that we'd be paying. Right now, businesses are trying to offload at almost 5, 6, 7 times what they're actually worth. Does that really make sense for us right now? Are we really buying at a discount? Okay, so we looked at the numbers, and this is what it looked like if we were to buy the real retail chains. And currently, we looked at their profit margins. At most, Kailden is pulling in a 12% profit margin. Historically, we've been able to pull in 24%. That's half of what we can do. But what would we want to do if we were to buy? We'd want to buy what would have the most growth. So we'd be looking at, say, Vanguard. They don't have as much market capitalization, and profit margin is lower, but that means we'd be able to buy them at a discount. But the key here is that they're selling at 5, 6, 7 times what they're worth. So is it smart for us to do that right now? Absolutely not. So again, we would buy Vanguard, but we're not going to. And we just looked at a quick NPV, and there's a few assumptions that we put in here. So we're looking at a 5-year return at a 7% growth, and that's using our growth annually. In Fort McMurray, there's only been a 2% growth. So this is really trying to inflate the numbers, but still, NPV is at a huge negative. So does it make sense for us? Absolutely not. Okay, second alternative then is what if we build our own stores? Let's not build off an already existing retail chain. Again, we don't think that this is going to be in our best interest. Why? Economy, again, it's on a downturn, and there's an overall decline in the building industry. So again, we looked at the numbers. Now, it does have a relatively better NPV, but again, it's still terrible compared to our third alternative, which is to sell off our 2 businesses and focus on our core operations within Quebec as well as in Ontario. So, sell the Fort Mac stores and the numbers behind it. So what we looked at right now was if we were to sell our 5 stores that we currently have, sorry, our 2 stores that we have, and looked at their 5-year returns, dropping back to present day, if we were able to sell it at the multiplier of say 6 in between 5 and 7, we think we'd be able to get about $23 million for that. Now we think that this is going to be a huge advantage for us right now because everybody else is selling at an overinflated price. Let's get out now while we can and get the most amount of money for our stores. So just a quick summary though of what our 3 options are. When you look at the quants, all we have right now is one option, and that's to sell, to make sure we actually get a positive gain. Now, what we did is we also looked at the qualitative part though. It's not just about the money. Now, if we were to buy the chain, there's already an existing customer base, but it's not for the customer base that's going to allow us to grow. Again, we're looking at the innovative products that Komatsu's putting out, and we're looking at the building industry, not the construction industry. If we were to build our own though, target where demand is expected to grow. Now, we would be able to bring in that new products from Komatsu, right? But the amount that we would have to pay to do that, again, if we were to build, it's not worth it. But if we were to sell, we'd be able to sell it for the $23 million, and again, focus on that core within Alberta as well as Quebec, and grow from there. And I'll go in a little bit later on how we're going to grow. Okay, so I'll hand it off to Cassie now, and she's going to show you exactly our decision matrix, how we chose, what we chose, and go into more depth for our recommendation.
Awesome, thank you, Ryan. So as Ryan previously mentioned, we are looking at selling. And the reason behind this is that when we looked and we did a decision matrix here, we saw that it was the best for your company not only in the short term, but also in the long term. So moving forward, you really want to be a profitable company. You already mentioned that you had increasing revenues throughout the last few years, and you want to see that continue. So when we looked at moving forward, we looked at profitability as a huge advantage. So we weighted this the highest at 40%. And when we looked at all the options, selling was the only one that really gave you that alternative. Another big option was market capture and stability. So again, Fort McMurray is a cyclical nature, and you want to make sure that when you move forward with an option, that you do have some sort of stability, I guess, in determining what you can get in the future. But market capture is also another really big one, because the building industry as a whole actually isn't quite dominated by a really big player yet. So you have an advantage here in that you can get ahead and get a good foot in the door. Alignment with management. Now again, a huge advantage for your company is that you have very strong management and that they are centered heavily in Ontario and Quebec. Now you did mention that previously in Alberta, a big issue with opening and operating those stores was that the distance from Ontario and Quebec prevented management from having a really big impact in those stores. So what we wanted is to pick an option that allowed you not only to make sure that you were profitable, but also that it aligned with your management's goals, and that moving forward they are focused on Ontario and Quebec, and we want to make sure that we continue with that focus. So when we looked at all these options, selling was the best one, which leads us to our recommendation. We want you to sell those stores and focus on your core operations in Eastern Canada. So what we're going to do, we're going to focus on the core operations by selling the stores immediately. And this way, your management is going to be able to further increase sales there, and you're also going to get a leg up on the building industry there. Now, Komatsu has also mentioned they have these new innovative products, so what we want to do is introduce these here into Eastern Canada, where you already have a great reputation, and you can continue to build on that reputation. Now, we do recognize some risks with this, though, that Komatsu could be negatively impacted your relationship with them. Komatsu has mentioned to you that they really do want to expand to Western Canada, but again, we think that this is their goal and not necessarily your goal. Your goal is to continue as a company and to be very sustainable and have good financial growth, and we think that Komatsu may be forcing you down this path when it may not necessarily be good for you. So that's why we do recognize that a risk could be that your relationship is affected due to differing goals. Another risk is that you're unable to find a leaseholder. So again, with selling these, Fort McMurray is in a downturn, and there could be implications that everyone's trying to sell, and they may not necessarily be able to get someone who's able to take it. So just going into the financials here, we're going to look at your growth, and in terms of this, we're going to hope to grow your revenue by 70%. So when we look at this, your revenue is going to increase over the next 5 years, and your net profit is as well. Now, we did make some assumptions here that your growth rate will be 7.1% and that your profit margin will be 24%. Now, what we're hoping is that even though you're selling those 2 stores and you're no longer having revenue coming from those, based on Komatsu's new products and your increased presence in Ontario and Quebec, we expect that you'll be able to increase revenues further based on that. So again, talking about this new product line, what we really want to do is use Komatsu's innovation and really sell it to this new customer base. And what we want to do is focus on creating customer loyalty. So we want to further increase Komatsu's brand in Canada. Because you are their biggest distributor, we want to ensure that Komatsu knows that you are fully committed to this relationship. So what does this mean? So this means that in terms of connections, you're going to continue to use your connections in Eastern Canada, but you're going to try and strengthen that relationship with Komatsu by introducing their new product line in Canada and ensuring that everyone is able to have access to it. And you're going to use this technology with the new equipment, and in terms of prosperity, you're going to focus on core operations, which is going to allow you to increase your financial health. So now I'm going to pass off to Lizette, who's going to go over the implementation plan.
Thank you, Cassie. So how should you carry out this implementation? We want you to start by making that proposition to Komatsu and telling them to take over the existing lease that you do currently have. We also want you to really make the foundation, having that set foundation of the 2 stores within Fort McMurray as your selling point. We also want you to start looking at potential leaseholders that could potentially take over that lease in case Komatsu does reject your lease, taking over that lease. Again, we want you to look into other retail chains that currently exist within Fort McMurray, and we want you to make the selling point to really focus on Komatsu's, the innovative technology that you currently do have in your stores. Within 1 to 6 months, we want you to exit Fort McMurray. Again, we want you to lease out your old stores, and we want you to potentially end your contract, potentially enter contract at the end of December of 2015 if nobody ends up taking over your lease. We also want you to start researching into new building equipment. We want you to differentiate yourself from the Komatsu brand, and we want you to conduct a market analysis. Look into current competition and pricing, and seeing what prices you should be renting at and seeing how much it's going to cost to buy that new equipment. We also want you to begin marketing the new building equipment within the industry. We want you to start speaking to your current customer base and seeing which customers would be interested in buying out that new equipment, and looking also into seeing whether or not you could use those connections to further reach other customers. Within 6 months to a year, we want you to negotiate a contract with Komatsu for the new innovative equipment. Again, this is going to allow you to enter the new segment of building, and we want you to begin selling the new equipment immediately. Within over a year, we want you to measure the demand of the new equipment that you're currently selling, seeing how profitable it is, and seeing whether or not it's really worth it. Finally, we want you to continue to grow within Ontario and Quebec and making that the asset of your company. So some risks and mitigations that you do run with this recommendation are the following. So first is your relationship with Komatsu is negatively impacted. We can mitigate this risk by purchasing the new equipment that you're going to use to take over the building industry within Ontario and Quebec. And we also want you to continue growth within Ontario and Quebec. Another risk is your competition. So again, Redwood is, you run the possibility of Redwood taking over the sales within Alberta. We're going to mitigate this by focusing your core operations, and again, continuing to build your brand by expanding where you're currently most operating is in the strongest provinces of Ontario and Quebec. The last risk is that you're unable to find a leaseholder. In that case, we want you to carry out your current operations until the end of 2015, and then stop renewing your contract. So, in retrospect, the main issue was how you should continue to grow. We recommended to sell Fort McMurray stores. Again, though they are currently making profit, the situation in Fort McMurray is very unstable, and it's a complete red flag. Operating within Fort McMurray would only take you down. And the impact of this is financial health. Now I'm just going to pass it off to Ryan.
So what does this all mean though? Let's take it back to the very beginning. Why are we going with these recommendations? But more importantly, why not? Because it doesn't make sense for us. Fort McMurray, it used to be fantastic. Oil was, when it was $100, things were great. Now that it's under 30, it's time for us to get up. When we bought 10 years ago, we bought 5 stores, now we're down to 2. There's a reason, because the economy is tanking, right? Let's get out now, let's go back to Ontario, Quebec, that's where we're dominating, right? So again, what did Warren Buffett say? Great businesses say yes to a lot of things, but fantastic businesses, the ones that are at the top of their games, they say no to even more. Thank you, and I'll open up the floor for any questions.
Thank you. That concludes the presentation portion. We'll now go on to the question and answer period.
I'll start off here. So you talked about the risks, you talked a little bit about mitigating, and just a little bit of clarification. So the one risk is we can't find a leaseholder, we can't find a buyer. So if we sell it, I think your number was somewhere around $20 million that we were expecting to get, and we can't find anyone, and we just don't get that money, we just pack it in and leave it. Wouldn't it make more sense to just leave that business operating until we do find a seller? I guess what was your rationale behind packing it in rather than just keep it going?
I can take that. So with your contract being due at the end of December, you're planning to renovate it again for 5 years. Again, because the situation within Fort McMurray is so unstable, we're going to renovating that contract for an extra 5 years would be pretty risky for you in case things within Fort McMurray continue to be in that downturn that it currently is sitting at.
Okay, I'll ask. I got asked about the NPV. So you had a negative $224 million for the buying of the jeans? Was that for all three chains? Was that for one of them? When I look at the profit before tax, I see positive numbers, so how did we come up with that number?
Yeah, absolutely. So the calculation for that number took into effect, if we were to buy Vanguard, we'd only buy the one chain. Now, if we were to buy Vanguard, we want to assume that we'd be able to grow their profit by 7%, which has been our historical growth rate. And then what we did is we took those 5 years and brought them back to present day. And then we looked at, okay, what would Vanguard want for us? So right now, there's a multiplier in Fort McMurray, 5 to 7 times 5-year earnings. So we just times that by 6, and we calculated that Vanguard would be asking us for a little over $200 million, right? So we just looked at that and compared that to our 5-year return.
Given the importance of your Komatsu relationship, any other alternatives other than just doubling down on the core competency? Any other growth opportunities or alternatives you would consider in the West?
Yes, so in terms of Komatsu, we also looked at, given that there's really high overhead costs with working out of Alberta, potentially outsourcing, so using your competitors and being able to sell to them, and using Komatsu and selling their equipment through your company, and that way you could also get a foot in the Alberta as well.
So we would partner with existing competitors?
Yeah, so one of the retail chains that we can start buying, we would sell Komatsu's equipment to them, and then that way they'd be able to create some customer loyalty in the West.
So I'll ask one more too. Okay, so just another great investment strategy is to buy low and sell high, and in times of cyclical economies, it is a good idea to try to get in when it's low, and your earnings multiplier could potentially be much higher when times are high. What are your thoughts on that in the Alberta economy?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. You'd want to buy low and then sell high later on. But we think right now with Fort McMurray, it may rebound, but is it really going to rebound at where it's been beforehand? And it's going to be within the right time frame for us. We think right now, with Komatsu coming out with their new innovations, their new innovative products, we really want to capitalize on them right now. Now we think putting those out into the Fort McMurray market, it doesn't make sense. Now, if we have 38 stores already in Quebec and Ontario, our reach with those new products is going to be even more so than with Fort McMurray. So we really want to focus on those right now.
That concludes the question and answer period.